Vaccines are very important, certain ones, the ones that would prevent death or crippling. There are others, a multitude of vaccines which probably don't fit in that category, and there should be some discretion in those cases.
You take this little beautiful baby and you pump. I mean, it looks just like it's meant for a horse, not for a child. And we've had so many instances, people that work for me just the other day, 2 years old, 2.5 years old, a child, a beautiful child, went to have the vaccine and came back and a week later got a tremendous fever, got very, very sick, now is autistic. I only say it's not, I'm in favor of vaccines. Do them over a longer period of time, same amount.
It is true that we are probably giving way too many in too short a period of time. And a lot of pediatricians now recognize that, and I think are cutting down on the number and the proximity in which those are done.
And that's all I'm saying.
So I'm all for vaccines, but I'm also for freedom. I'm also a little concerned about how they're bunched up.
I don't know who won last night's Republican debate, but I know that the American Academy of Pediatrics thinks they lost, or at least that America's infants lost, because of the anti-vaccine conspiracy theories that were put forth in last night's debate by frontrunner Donald Trump, and then basically supported by the two medical doctors up there on the dais as well, Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Ben Carson. You could see the American Academy of Pediatrics freaking out during the debate as the candidates went down that conspiracy theory rabbit hole on vaccines. The American Academy of Pediatrics started tweeting out basically, no, 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 they've got this wrong. Don't listen to this. They put out a formal statement about why vaccines are important and they don't cause autism. They distributed a video of a pediatrician explaining why it's important to take them on the right schedule instead of spacing them out like Dr. Trump said and the other actual doctors there last night. So let's turn now to the Democratic frontrunner in New Hampshire and maybe in Iowa, too, Senator Bernie Sanders. I want to get your reaction to that last night. That was one of the I mean, it made me feel like last night's Republican debate was like a public health hazard in addition to everything else that it was.
Well, actually, over the years, people in Vermont have met with me on this issue. But I think the evidence is overwhelming that vaccines do not cause autism. And it really is a little bit weird for Trump, who has, I presume, no medical background, to be raising this issue. And obviously it is concerned, because when somebody like that says it, you're going to find thousands of people now who are going to hesitate to give their kids the shots, and bad things may happen.
In terms of the relationship between Democrats and Republicans at this point in this national discussion that we're having, early on in the process, you and I talked about your proposal, I think it was back in June, that Democrats and Republicans should start debating each other now, even before the Republican primary process is done. Are you still into that idea?
Absolutely. I think the more debates, the merrier. And I'll tell you what I think. I think is that Republicans get away with murder because they are never challenged. Last night, I have to tell you, I did quit after 2.5 hours. The energy was just sucked out of my body. I was exhausted watching this stuff. In terms of the major issues facing America, did you hear one word from anybody who said, well, you know, climate change is a real threat to the planet. We need bold action? No. Did you hear one person say, well, the real value of the minimum wage has declined significantly over the years. We need to raise the minimum wage? No. Did you hear one person say one word about 30 million Americans not having any health insurance? And the United States, being the only major country in the world, doesn't provide health care to all people or family or medical leave? One word? Was there one word in terms of what the American people want, asking the rich and large corporations to stop paying their fair share of taxes? Not one word. And in terms of immigration, which you did hear a whole lot about, the majority of people believe there should be a process, a path towards citizenship for undocumented people. Not one of those guys had anything to say in support of that concept.
You went to Liberty University this week, very ideologically unfriendly territory. You were, I listened to the speech. You were very respectful to your audience. They greeted you very respectfully,
yes,
and I think heard you respectfully. With Donald Trump so dominant in the Republican field, I wonder if you are starting to think about a plan for trying to appeal to people who think of themselves not as liberals, not even as centrists, but as moderate conservatives. They usually think of themselves as Republicans, but they cannot stomach somebody like Mr. Trump as their nominee. Do you have a crossover appeal plan?
Absolutely. And Rachel, to the best of my knowledge, in the state of Vermont, we get about 25% of the Republican vote. Now, why is that? Because people say, okay, I disagree with Bernie on women's rights. I disagree with Bernie on gay rights. Okay. But you know what? I believe he is fighting for my kids and for my parents and for the rights of the middle class. And you see a lot of those folks say, all right, I disagree with him, but I'm going to vote for him. Now, you're absolutely right. The folks at Liberty University were extremely gracious and respectful. And here was my simple point to them. You guys are a religious group of people. You're concerned about morality. All right, let's put it on the table. I disagree with you on abortion rights. I disagree with you on gay rights. End of discussion. How do we come together? Isn't it a moral issue that in America today we are seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires at the same time as we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth? Isn't that a moral issue?
Even if you're a conservative, don't you see that as a moral issue?
Absolutely. Yeah. It is. And I think many of them are saying, yeah. And we've gotten some wonderful responses from some of the evangelicals. Is it a moral issue? Listen to what the Pope says, what other religious leaders, evangelicals say about destroying this planet in terms of climate change. These people understand it. They see it as God's earth, and it should be protected. And yet you got Republicans up there, not one of them, believing that we have to move aggressively to save the planet. Yes, I think we can reach out in a respectful way, understanding there are very important issues we disagree on. Let's go forward together where we can find common ground.
We've got more with Vermont Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders right after this. Stay with us. Happy Monday. Had a great weekend. Thanks for asking. It snowed all day long yesterday when I was home in Western Massachusetts. Never snows this early. My 6-month-old puppy has never seen snow before. It terrified him, which was sad for him for a second, but mostly it was just adorable. It was really cute. So I'm in a great mood. I'm also in a great mood because I just found out that I'm getting my first ever Hillary Clinton interview. Never, ever, ever have I had the chance to interview Hillary Clinton. I am about to. We'll have more on that in just a second. I am also in a great mood because today's news required us to take a trip to the archive drawer marked Herman Cain. Yeah, you think our presidential race is weird right now? It is weird right now, but it has been weird before. And it was really weird in 2012 when, for a considerable period of time, Herman Cain was the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination.
When they ask me who's the president of you, Becky, Stan, I'm going to say, I don't know. Do you know?
We have some amazing Republican candidates for president this year, but Herman Cain was truly amazing. And it was clear early on at the end of the first Republican debate in 2012, so it was August of 2011. It was clear that early on that Herman Cain was going to be a different kind of guy. At that first debate, all the Republican candidates were invited to give their closing statements. And Mr. Cain used his closing statement to quote what he described as some of his favorite poetry.
A poet once said, "Life can be a challenge, life can seem impossible, but it's never easy when there's so much on the line."
The poet Herman Cain was quoting there at that first Republican debate in the 2012 race, the poet he was quoting was the Pokemon movie. That poetry he was quoting was part of the theme song to the Pokemon movie.
Life can be a challenge.
Life can be a challenge.
Life can seem impossible.
Life can seem impossible.
It's never easy.
But it's never easy when there's so much on the line.
Is on the line.
On the line. By October, that was August, by October, Herman Cain was actually winning the race for the Republican presidential nomination, starting about this time of year in that race, starting mid-October and straight through about mid-November for basically a whole month. Herman Cain was either in the lead for the Republican presidential nomination or he was trading the lead with Mitt Romney. By November 18th, Herman Cain was so firmly ensconced as the frontrunner for the Republican nomination that he requested and got protection from the United States Secret Service.
Herman Cain has become the first Republican primary candidate to receive Secret Service protection. It is early in the process for a primary candidate to get a Secret Service detail. It's usually in response to an increase in verified threats. And in Florida today, Cain talked about his new heavily armed traveling companions.
We had private security for a while before we asked for Secret Service protection. But we wanted to move to that next level because of my ranking in the polls and the additional scrutiny that I have been getting.
Cain spoke in Orlando, and already just behind the camera, he was surrounded by Secret Service and local police.
So that was November 18th, 2011. Herman Cain in that presidential race, in the last presidential race, he was the first candidate to get protection of the Secret Service that year. Interestingly, though, within 2 weeks of the Secret Service starting to protect him, Herman Cain quit the race. He was out in early December. And while he was quitting, he again quoted the Pokemon movie.
Let me leave you with this. And I believe these words came from the Pokemon movie. The media pointed that out. I'm not sure who the original author is, so don't go write an article about the poem. But it says a lot about where I am with my wife and my family, and where we are as a nation. Life can be a challenge. Life can seem impossible. It's never easy when there's so much on the line.
So much on the... Herman Cain, 2 weeks after becoming the first Republican candidate to get Secret Service protection in the 2012 race, that was him dropping out of the race in early December. Well, today, news not quite yet confirmed, but reported by multiple sources, that not one, but two Republican candidates for president this year are about to get Secret Service protection, even earlier than Herman Cain did the last time around. The Donald Trump campaign and the Ben Carson campaign today both indicated, and the Homeland Security Department later confirmed today that they've been asked. Those two campaigns have requested Secret Service protection for each of those candidates. Now, just asking for Secret Service protection doesn't mean you automatically get it. But apparently what happens now is that the Homeland Security Secretary and a high-level Congressional Advisory Committee, which includes the top leadership of both houses of Congress and both parties, apparently they will now make that decision as to whether or not Donald Trump and Herman Cain are going to get Secret Service protection. And as remarkable as that seems, it is not unprecedented for candidates like Trump and Carson to get this sort of thing. I mean, everybody remembers the decision to give Barack Obama very early Secret Service protection in 2008. But other leading candidates have had it early in the process as well, including, Mr. 999, Mr. Pokemon theme song, including Herman Cain. And one of the ways that the Republican establishment has tried to dismiss the profound weirdness of reality TV show star Donald Trump being their party's frontrunner for the Republican nomination is by talking about candidates like 2012 one-time frontrunner Herman Cain, by talking about that 2012 race and remembering all the people who cycled through the lead. Basically, one of the ways that Republicans have tried to dismiss how weird it is that Donald Trump is their frontrunner is by saying, listen, 4 years ago, all sorts of people we barely remember were leading the race at one time or another. And it is true. I mean, this time 4 years ago, it was Herman Cain in the lead, and he held that lead for about a month in national polls. Before Herman Cain, it had been Rick Perry who held the lead for about 5.5 weeks in the national polls. He held the lead from mid-August to the end of September. After Rick Perry and after Herman Cain, it was Newt Gingrich who held the lead in the Republican race that year from mid-November to mid-December. And then Newt Gingrich had another little flurry at the top of the polls in mid-January. In February, there was one blissful period of about 2 weeks when Rick Santorum was in the lead, when he was winning the Republican nomination for president. It's true. Those oddball and also ran candidates, they did trade the lead like a hot potato during the 2012 race before the party ultimately settled on their eventual establishment nominee, Mitt Romney. But that sort of trading the lead among a bunch of different people, that is not what's happening this year in the Republican Party. Donald Trump is not Herman Cain. Donald Trump is not Rick Santorum. I mean, this year, Donald Trump has held the lead for the Republican nomination longer than all of those 2012 candidates I just mentioned combined. Donald Trump has held the lead in every national poll, every single one, dating back to almost the 4th of July. More than 30 straight national polls over a period of more than 3 months have Donald Trump holding the lead. Donald Trump has, quote, sustained a lead for longer than there are days left before voting begins in Iowa. That quote from MSNBC contributor Steve Schmidt, who, of course, ran the John McCain-Sarah Palin campaign in 2008. Steve is quoted making this observation in a new front-page freakout in the conservative National Review magazine that's titled, quote, "The establishment thinks the unthinkable. Donald Trump could win the nomination." This is the lead of that piece. This is amazing. It started as whispers in hushed corners. Could it ever happen? And now, just 3 months from the Iowa caucuses, members of the Republican establishment are starting to give voice to an increasingly common belief that Donald Trump, once dismissed as a joke, a carnival barker, and a circus freak, might very well win the Republican nomination. Quote, longtime GOP strategists who were expecting Trump's act to wear thin a couple of months ago now worry that he cannot be stopped, or at least that he has a significant chance of winning the nomination. This is a conservative magazine, and they're quoting establishment Republican figures. It's the same theme today at McClatchy News Service. Trump's still up with just over 100 days to go in Iowa. The subtitles on this one are, Donald Trump is better organized than you think. And the battle for establishment votes, presumably non-Donald Trump votes, the battle for establishment votes in Iowa is, quote, a mess. I mean, whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea that the Republican Party might pick Donald Trump to be their presidential nominee, the Republican establishment, both in Iowa and nationwide in general, is turning. They are now starting to believe that the Republican Party is going to pick Donald Trump to be their presidential nominee. And the latest national poll on the Republican race is out just tonight from NBC and the Wall Street Journal. It confirms the theme. Donald Trump solidly still in the lead with 25% of the vote. The only person close to him is Ben Carson with 22% of the vote. Then the next closest contender is Marco Rubio down in third place with 13%. Jeb Bush in tonight's NBC Wall Street Journal poll continues to languish in the single digits, which is mostly where he is confined now in national polling and in the early states. This new NBC Wall Street Journal poll out tonight has Jeb Bush in 6th place with only 8% of the vote nationwide. Jeb Bush is currently spending all his time talking about his brother's decision to invade Iraq and why his brother didn't respond to the bin Laden determined to strike in the United States memo that came out before the 9/11 attacks. Whether or not you want Jeb Bush to do well in his presidential campaign, if those are the things that Jeb Bush is talking about right now, you can be pretty sure that he is not doing well in his presidential campaign. Those are not the sorts of things a Jeb Bush candidacy wants to dwell on. But Donald Trump has driven Jeb Bush absolutely to distraction by criticizing George W. Bush's time as president. I mean, it's making the Republican establishment crazy, but Donald Trump is clearly enjoying it, and he has doubled down and tripled down on it since he started that line of attack on Friday simply by pointing out that George W. Bush was the president when 9/11 happened. So when Jeb Bush says he kept us safe, he must not mean 9/11. So the top of the Republican field is not just clear at this point, it's static. It's just Donald Trump and Ben Carson, and it has been for quite some time now. This is not 2012. This is a whole different thing, and these guys are winning. Here's something to watch, though, at the bottom of the Republican field. The next Republican debate is next week, right? Next Wednesday. This is the debate that's going to be hosted by CNBC. There's been all these kerfuffles about the format and how long it's going to be, blah, blah, blah. CNBC debate is going to be in Boulder, Colorado. In order to qualify to make it into that debate, the Republican candidates have to have a polling average of 2.5% and an average of these national polls: NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, CNN, and Bloomberg. And those polls have to be published between these dates, between September 17th and October 21st. Well, the new NBC poll that came out tonight is one of those polls, one of those qualifying polls to get into the next debate. Here's the thing, though. We don't know what polls are going to come out in the next 2 days. But there really are only 2 more days. Only polls that come out over the next 2 days from those major polling organizations will factor into the qualifying process. And right now, with 2 days left, there are two big-name major candidates who really are on the cusp of not making it into the next Republican debate, not making it onto the main debate stage. I mean, right now, if you average the qualifying polls for the CNBC debate, including tonight's new poll from NBC Wall Street Journal, both Chris Christie and Rand Paul are at 2.86%. Remember, the cutoff is 2.5%. And again, we don't know how many polls are going to come out over the next 2 days before the qualifying period ends. Any polls that come out from those major organizations will be factored into this average. But if Chris Christie and Rand Paul keep getting numbers like the numbers they got today, they keep getting 1 or 2% in the polls, they are both within a hair's breadth of not making it onto the stage for the next debate. So it's one thing to watch, really, just for the next 2 days, for national polls that come out tomorrow and Wednesday. If Rand Paul or Chris Christie come in at 2% or 1% or worse in any polls that come out tomorrow and Tuesday, beep boo, beep boo. I mean, that is an emergency for both of those campaigns. Somebody's also apparently pulling the fire alarm in the bottom tier of the Democratic race for president. Jim Webb's campaign just announced tonight that he's going to be holding a press conference tomorrow. It's going to happen 1 o'clock Eastern at the National Press Club. And at this press conference, Jim Webb may announce that he is dropping out of the Democratic race for president, perhaps in order to mount an independent run for president. The headline, the subject line on the press release they emailed out today was, Jim Webb to consider independent run. I mean, in the Democratic race, Jim Webb is not doing great overall. He's at 1% in 2 Democratic national polls that came out today, one from CNN and one from Monmouth. 1% isn't that bad this year. And at 1% nationwide, Jim Webb is beating both Lincoln Chafee and Martin O'Malley, both of whom are polling at 0 nationwide in both of those 2 new polls. One New Hampshire poll that came out on Friday had Jim Webb at 3% in New Hampshire. And that's gangbusters for this year. If Jim Webb were a Republican, 3% would put him ahead of George Pataki, Bobby Jindal, Rick Santorum, Mike Huckabee, Lindsey Graham, and Rand Paul in that state. I mean, unluckily for him, Jim Webb is not running as a Republican. As of today, he's running as a Democrat. That may be over as of tomorrow. We'll see. Again, 1 o'clock at the National Press Club. In New Hampshire, I should tell you that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton appear to now be trading the lead in that state. Secretary Clinton was ahead of Bernie Sanders in that New Hampshire poll that was released on Friday. But in a Boston Herald Franklin Pierce poll that came out today, Bernie Sanders is back in the lead in New Hampshire. Hillary Clinton continues to maintain a commanding lead nationwide in every poll, but Bernie Sanders been ahead of her in almost every poll recently in New Hampshire. That said, this is likely to be a very big week for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. On Thursday of this week, she's going to be on TV all day long and probably into the night, because Thursday's the day she's going to give her sworn testimony to the super controversial Benghazi committee led by the House Republicans. That committee has felt like it has been imploding over the last couple of weeks, but they have got her for an indefinite period of testimony on Thursday. And that's not closed-door testimony. That's going to be on TV. So that's going to be a very big deal on Thursday. Then on Saturday, Hillary Clinton just announced that she's going to be speaking at the Jefferson-Jackson dinner in Iowa. The Jefferson-Jackson dinner, a lot of states do this. It's a big deal in Iowa in election years. It's particularly a big deal for Hillary Clinton, historically speaking, because it was Barack Obama's blockbuster speech at that same dinner in 2007 that's been repeatedly cited by the Iowa press as a turning point and a breakthrough moment for his candidacy that year when he famously went on to win Iowa. So Hillary Clinton's campaign announced today that she's going to be speechifying at that Jefferson-Jackson dinner on Saturday night, and she will also be accompanied by her husband, former President Bill Clinton, who does not generally do campaign events with her. Him being there with her means they are pulling out all the stops. So Thursday, the Benghazi committee. Saturday, that big deal speech in Iowa. And in between those 2 days on Friday, she's going to be here. My first ever interview with former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton is going to happen right here on this show on Friday. And my puppy had his first snowfall. You know, it's a pretty exciting day all around here. There's lots more to come tonight. Please stay with us.